It is 6:14 a.m. The Arabian Sea east of the Strait of Hormuz carries the particular light of a sunrise that is not yet committed to itself, a gray-orange gradient at the horizon that changes the color of the water from black to something closer to dark green, that makes the carrier's island superstructure look momentarily warmer than it is, that illuminates the flight deck in a flat, directionless light that the aircraft handling crews have learned to work in without relying on it. The Abraham Lincoln is into its 17th day of operations. The flight deck has been cycling aircraft for 16 of those days at a tempo that the maintenance teams track in man-hours and component wear rates in the accumulating arithmetic of machines asked to perform at a level that is sustainable for days, stressful for weeks, and that produces, at the 17-day mark, a maintenance picture that no one on the ship is comfortable with, but that no one can address until the operational requirement changes. The operational requirement has not changed. At 6:14 a.m., the contact is first detected not by radar but by the Signals Intelligence Suite, the ES-3 equivalent systems aboard the carrier, passive electronic collection arrays that listen rather than transmit, that build a picture of the electromagnetic environment without announcing their own presence. Detect an active radar emission from a contact bearing 047 degrees northeast, range estimated at 180 nautical miles. The emission frequency is cataloged in the threat library. The library match takes 4 seconds. The match is a Shahed-149 reconnaissance variant, not an attack platform, not a kamikaze drone, but a long-endurance intelligence collection system carrying electro-optical and synthetic aperture radar sensors, a system designed to watch, to record, to transmit. What it is watching at 180 nautical miles and closing on a bearing that places it on a direct track toward the strike group is the Abraham Lincoln. The contact report reaches the CIC at 6:15 a.m. The Tactical Action Officer marks the track as hostile intelligence collection asset and initiates an air intercept tasking sequence. The sequence moves from the CIC to the Air Warfare Coordinator to the flight deck in 63 seconds. The aircraft designated for the Intercept mission is an A-18F Super Hornet, currently on the Catapult shuttle on Catapult 2, loaded for a strike mission that is now being repurposed. The crew, pilot and weapon systems officer, receive the new tasking through the aircraft's data link and through a brief radio transmission from the Air Warfare Coordinator that covers the contact's last known position, bearing, altitude, and the specific instruction that this is an intercept and identification mission, not a weapons employment mission, and that rules of engagement for the engagement of an intelligence collection platform in international airspace will be clarified en route. The F/A-18F launches at 6:16:43 a.m. The catapult stroke compresses 2 seconds of physics into a physical experience that the crew has had hundreds of times and that never becomes entirely routine. The acceleration from zero to flying speed in a distance that requires the aircraft's wing to begin generating lift before the conscious mind has fully registered that the deck has ended. The aircraft clears the bow and climbs. The Gulf of Oman falls away beneath the left wing. The Arabian Sea extends northeast toward a horizon that is still doing its morning arithmetic with the light. The air intercept controller aboard the carrier sequences the intercept geometry. The contact is at approximately 170 nautical miles, altitude estimated at 18,000 feet based on the emission signature and the radar return characteristics. The F/A-18F at military power is closing at a rate that will produce a visual intercept in approximately 14 minutes. The intercept geometry places the merge point roughly 110 nautical miles northeast of the carrier, well inside the strike group's radar coverage, well outside the carrier's own defensive umbrella in any meaningful tactical sense. The crew will be alone out there with whatever the contact is and whatever the contact decides to do when it realizes it has been intercepted. At 6:19 a.m., the rules of engagement clarification arrives from 5th Fleet. The message is 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph establishes the authority to intercept and identify the contact in international airspace. The second paragraph establishes that the contact, as an uninhabited aerial system conducting reconnaissance against a U.S. Navy strike group in international airspace, falls within a specific ROE category that permits graduated responses up to and including the use of weapons if the contact fails to withdraw after the intercept and takes actions consistent with weapons targeting activity. The third paragraph instructs the crew to complete a visual identification pass, transmit a radio warning on guard frequency, and report back before taking any further action. The paragraph ends with a sentence that the weapons systems officer reads twice before she annotates it in her kneeboard. Authority to engage is retained at 5th Fleet pending contact behavior assessment. She reads it twice because it means she and her pilot are going to make the visual identification pass on a drone that may or may not have been specifically tasked to find the carrier and whose operators, sitting in a ground control station somewhere on the Iranian coast or in Yemen, may or may not have prepared a response to exactly this situation. They will do this, and then they will transmit what they see, and then they will wait to be told what to do next. Professional discipline means you absorb the structure of your authority and operate within it regardless of what your own assessment of the situation suggests about the timeline available. The contact is now 140 nautical miles ahead. At 6:23 a.m., the APG-79 active electronically scanned array radar aboard the F/A-18F acquires the contact at 89 nautical miles. The radar return is large for a drone. This is not the 1-meter cross-section of a Shahed kamikaze platform, but a significantly larger airframe, a platform built for endurance rather than expendability, carrying sensor mass and fuel in proportions that make it look, on the radar display, almost like a light aircraft. The fire control system builds a track and begins the passive targeting solution that exists independently of whether a weapon is ever authorized against it. The solution runs because the system is designed to run it, and because a crew that has been told it might need to engage does not wait until engagement is authorized to have a solution ready. The WSO transmits the radar track data to the carrier at 6:24 a.m. The CIC receives it and updates the tactical picture. The contact's altitude is confirmed at 17,500 feet. Its speed is 145 knots. At that speed and altitude, it has a radar coverage footprint that the signals intelligence operators aboard the carrier calculate is currently imaging a circle of ocean approximately 340 nautical miles in diameter. The carrier is inside that circle. The carrier's surface group is inside that circle. Everything the strike group has been doing for the past 6 hours is inside that circle and has been transmitted in compressed burst formats on frequencies the signal's intelligence suite has been recording, but cannot jam without revealing the extent of American collection capability against Iranian drone communications architecture to whoever is watching the feed. The Intercept is now 61 nautical miles. At 6:26 a.m., the contact executes a maneuver. Not evasion. A drone of this type does not evade a fighter in any useful sense. The performance envelope of a long-endurance reconnaissance platform does not include the kind of agility that would make evasion a viable option against an F/A-18F. The maneuver is a turn to the south. The contact is turning away from the strike group, not toward Iran, not toward any coastal feature. South, perpendicular to its original track, a course change that takes it off the direct approach bearing and onto a new heading that will run it parallel to the strike group at a range that the fire control solution calculates as approximately 90 nautical miles. 90 nautical miles. Far enough that claiming harassment would be difficult. Close enough that a synthetic aperture radar system on an extended endurance platform can continue building a detailed picture of the carrier strike group's composition, formation geometry, and emission signatures for as long as its fuel permits. The contact has not withdrawn. It has repositioned. The distinction is the same one the TAO made about the Kilo-class submarine 11 days ago, and it carries the same tactical meaning, a platform that detects a response to its presence and repositions rather than withdrawing, has decided that its mission is more important than the risk of continued exposure. The contact is going to continue watching the carrier from a different angle. The pilot calls the maneuver to the air intercept controller at 6:27 a.m. The AIC relays to the CIC. The CIC relays to the Air Warfare Coordinator. The AWC transmits to 5th Fleet. 5th Fleet's response takes 4 minutes and 11 seconds, a duration that the crew, now 42 nautical miles from the contact and closing at a combined closure rate that is making the intercept geometry dynamic in ways that require active navigation input, registers as time that is passing at a different rate than operational time usually passes. At 6:31 a.m., 5th Fleet transmits. The instruction is to proceed with the visual identification pass on the repositioned contact and to transmit the identification data. The parallel track repositioning is noted. The instruction adds one sentence that was not in the original ROE clarification. Contact behavior consistent with persistent intelligence collection against protected assets. Crew is authorized to use judgment in transmitting appropriate warning signals. The crew interprets this correctly. They have been authorized to make the contact understand, through whatever non-kinetic means are available to a fighter aircraft in proximity to a drone, that the current situation is being managed by people who have options beyond observation. At 6:33 a.m., the F/A-18F closes to visual range of the contact. The identification pass is conducted at 1,000 feet of altitude separation, the fighter positioning above and slightly ahead of the drone, and then pulling into a bank that gives the crew a direct optical view of the airframe below them. The contact is large, considerably larger than the Shahed kamikaze platforms that have been filling the tactical picture for 17 days. The airframe has a high aspect ratio wing optimized for endurance, a pusher-propeller configuration at the tail, sensor fairings on the nose and belly that house the electro-optical and synthetic aperture radar systems. The WSO activates the ATFLIR targeting pod and records a full optical and infrared documentation package of the contact from 4 separate aspect angles during the identification pass. The documentation transmits to the carrier in real time. The drone does not maneuver during the pass. It holds its course and altitude with the mechanical indifference of a system that is executing a programmed flight profile and that does not have, in any meaningful sense, the capacity to be surprised. But somewhere on the ground, in a control station that the signal's intelligence picture places somewhere in the vicinity of the Yemeni coast, a human operator is watching a feed from the drone's own cameras and is seeing an FA-18F Super Hornet filling that feed from a range of several hundred meters. The pilot positions the F/A-18F ahead of and below the drone at 6:35 a.m., reducing speed to match the drone's 145 knots, a speed that requires the fighter to be in a configuration that is neither comfortable nor optimal, but that is tactically necessary. At this position, directly in the drone's flight path 400 meters ahead, the F/A-18F activates its navigation lights to full intensity and begins a series of rock wing signals, the international aviation signal for "follow me," or in the interdiction context, you are directed to change course. The signal is made 4 times over 90 seconds. The drone's optical cameras are recording the signal. The ground operator is watching the signal. The ground operator is making a decision. At 6:37 a.m., the drone begins a turn. Not south, north, back toward Iran. The turn radius is slow. This is not an agile platform, but the bearing rate confirms within 45 seconds that the turn is genuine and directional and taking the contact back toward the Iranian coastline on a heading that will clear the strike group's operating area in approximately 70 minutes. The pilot calls the withdrawal to the AIC at 6:37:41 a.m. The call is factual and brief. The AIC acknowledges. The carrier's CIC updates the track. The TAO watches the contact's bearing rate on the display with the specific attention of someone who is not yet ready to classify the situation as resolved because a drone that has turned north is a drone that could turn south again, and the contact's fuel state, estimated from the time since it was first detected and its known endurance characteristics, suggests it has several hours of flight time remaining. The F/A-18F follows the contact north for 11 minutes, maintaining a position 600 meters behind and slightly below, the ATFLIR pod continuing to record, the data stream continuing to feed the carrier's picture. At 6:48 a.m., with the contact 140 nautical miles from the strike group and on a stable withdrawal bearing, the Air Intercept controller directs the crew to break off the tail and return to the carrier. The contact continues north. The fighter turns southwest. At 6:49 a.m., the signals intelligence suite aboard the carrier detects a burst transmission from the drone, compressed, directional, toward the Iranian coast. The transmission duration is 3 seconds. The content is encrypted and will not be decrypted by any system currently embarked. What it contains is unknown. What it certainly contains is the documentation package the drone sensors have been building since it first acquired the carrier strike group at 180 nautical miles. Formation geometry, ship types, emission signatures, course and speed data, the specific configuration of the defensive radar picture that a planning staff will use to optimize the next strike package sent against the Abraham Lincoln. The transmission is logged. The carrier's intelligence officer annotates it in the collection record. The record will be transmitted to theater intelligence architecture within the hour and will inform the defensive posture assessments that the operations staff generates every 6 hours. The information the drone collected and transmitted cannot be uncollected. It cannot be untransmitted. It is now in the possession of the adversary, and it will be used. The intercept that forced the drone's withdrawal reduced the quality and completeness of the collection. The drone spent 41 minutes on its repositioned parallel track rather than the 3 or 4 hours its fuel would have permitted on the original direct approach, but it did not prevent the collection. It shortened it. The difference between a complete collection pass and a shortened one is measured in the confidence level of the intelligence product the adversary generates from it. That difference matters. It is not the same as prevention. The F/A-18F enters the landing pattern at 6:58 a.m. The brake turn over the carrier is executed at 800 feet, and the downwind leg takes the aircraft out to the left side of the carrier's wake, where the LSO platform is manned and the optical glide slope indicator is showing the correct glide path. The approach is standard. The trap is clean, the arresting wire catching the tailhook at the correct point in the touchdown zone, the deceleration from 150 knots to 0 in less than 2 seconds. The physical experience of arrested landing that the crew has had hundreds of times and that never becomes entirely routine for the same reason the catapult launch never does. The crew is on deck at 6:59 a.m. The aircraft is chained and the engines are at idle by 7:01 a.m. The maintenance crew arrives. The ATFLIR pod is downloaded. The radar data is downloaded. The IFF records are downloaded. The full documentation package that was transmitted to the carrier in real time now exists in a second copy aboard the aircraft and will be added to the intelligence record of the contact within the hour. At 7:04 a.m., the signals intelligence suite detects a second emission source bearing 031 degrees northeast. Different frequency, different platform signature. The threat library match takes 3 seconds. The match is a different drone type, smaller, lower altitude, consistent with a shorter endurance tactical reconnaissance platform that the Iranian drone inventory has been operating in the Gulf of Oman and Arabian Sea for the past 8 months. The contact is at 210 nautical miles in closing. The Air Warfare Coordinator initiates a new intercept tasking sequence. The FA-18F that just landed is not available. It will be on deck for a minimum of 40 minutes for post-flight maintenance and refueling. The next aircraft in the duty rotation is on the catapult. It is a different crew, different airframe, same mission. The Air Intercept controller sequences the intercept. The crew receives the tasking. The catapult fires at 7:06 a.m. The carrier does not pause. The mission does not pause. The drone that was turned north is still transmitting its compressed burst toward the Iranian coast, and the drone now closing from the northeast is building its own collection package, and the strike group is still in the Arabian Sea on the 17th day of a campaign that has not paused since the first strike aircraft left this deck 2 weeks and 4 days ago. The maintenance crews are working. The intelligence officers are analyzing. The CIC watch is tracking. The flight deck is turning aircraft at a rate that the maintenance picture cannot sustain indefinitely and that the mission requirement does not currently permit to decrease. One Shahed-149 reconnaissance variant, 180 nautical miles of initial detection range, 41 minutes of shortened collection window, 1 visual identification pass, 4 rock wing signals, 1 withdrawal north, 1 burst transmission received by the adversary before the contact cleared the operating area. The drone collected less than it came for. The carrier collected everything the drone did and more. The Intercept cost 43 minutes of 1FA, 18F's time, and a catapult launch and a trap. The intelligence transmitted to Tehran costs something else, something measured not in minutes or sorties, but in the planning cycles it will enter and the strike packages it will inform. That cost is real, and it is not yet paid. It will be paid in a future engagement by crews who do not yet know they are part of this accounting against a threat that was refined by the picture, a drone built from 90 nautical miles, while an F/A, 18F, watched it from 600 meters behind. The Arabian Sea at 7:06 a.m. is the same water it was at 6:14 a.m. The carrier moves through it at the same speed on the same heading. The drone that was turned back is 160 nautical miles north and still transmitting. The drone now closing from the northeast is 195 nautical miles out and descending slightly, adjusting its collection altitude for the sensor geometry its mission profile requires. The fighter climbing away from Catapult 1 is at 4,000 feet and accelerating northeast. The watch does not end because one contact withdrew. The watch ends when the mission does. The mission has not given any indication of ending. They will be ready when it does.